Good day, everyone. I just want to say thank you for joining today's part 2 of a 3-part series. Today's part 2 video will entail how to manipulate your data, or not more manipulate, but transform it a little bit, change the data types, maybe changing a little bit there, making the data a bit smaller, more understandable, and then loading it to the model so that we can progress to part 3, which is the fun part, and building and visualizing the data. In part 1, just a quick recap, I explained quickly or quite nicely how to connect to a SQL Server database using the BI tool called Power BI. And more specifically, connecting to a database, an Acumatica database, whereby I mentioned I want to create an income versus expenses type of account. I want to see all the money that came in and all the money that went out so we can detect the profit or loss. That is what I'm going to do now in part 2. And then part 3, we're going to visualize it. So part 2, like I mentioned, we're going to focus on getting the data, extracting it, transforming a little bit, and loading it to the model. So let's jump right in. I'm going to open up Power BI and just wait for it to load. And then I'm going to follow step 1, which is connecting the data. Good. So once you've opened up Power BI, you will just see a blank screen. And then if you follow my mouse in the left-hand corner, you will see Get Data. We're going to click on the drop-down arrow there. So let's wait for it. There we go. And we're going to choose SQL Server as the most common connector. And then Power BI is going to ask us for a server name, which is very important. As I mentioned in part 1, where can I get it? I can click on Object Explorer in your SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio. And I can click on that little plug or connector there. Connect Object Explorer, and right there is my server name. I can copy it and I can paste it. Just please bear in mind that you have to have the right server that you want to connect to in order to get the right data. And you need to have the right authentication or access rights, security rights. If you do not have any access rights of any of such, please consult your DBA, your database administrator, or anybody in charge of the data itself. Okay. So that's enough for SQL Server today. Let's jump right into back to Power BI. Now I can obviously choose the database if I want to use it. I don't want to. I want to see all the databases because I want to choose different types of tables that are required in order to build this awesome income versus expenses report that I want to build. The two types of connectivities are import and direct query. So the import, it is going to take all the data from SQL Server database and push it into Power BI. And it's going to be very RAM intensive as it has to cache all the data in memory. And this is where you can build your formulas and work with the data a bit better. Direct query means it's going to, every single time you click or interact with the visual, it's going to run the query and it's going to go take it from SQL and then show you the result. This can be very, very time consuming, especially if your queries are extracting millions of rows of data. So rather, let's design and then we import it. And I'm going to click OK. And once it's connected to the server, it will display all the databases that are connected to the server. Now, as I can see, I've got 3. And for today, I want to work with the Acumatica database. So it's just a little bit of a quick recap on part 1. The tables I want to work with has to be account because I want to know what general ledger accounts plays a role into the income and expenses. Then I can just tick it and it will give me a little preview, but do not click load or transform yet. You can choose multiple tables or views and then load them or transform them all at the same time. Now, this is where you're going to need some little bit of knowledge of the Acumatica database to really know which tables have the right data in it. So I know that the accounts will have all the general ledger accounts for me. And then, of course, GL Tron, which will display all the transactions that were posted or transactions of the general ledger accounts. And I can choose that one right there, and it will give me a little preview screen on the right-hand side. Now, I'm not just going to click load. I'm not going to skip the step of extracting, transforming, and loading. No. Because if I load it, it can cause a little bit of problems because now my data is not clean yet. It's not filtered out yet. It's not sorted. It's not perfect yet. You need to get the data perfect because it's going to save a lot of time in the long run. Because as soon as you start building your graphs, you put your histograms and your scatter graphs, some of the data isn't going to make sense. Maybe there'll be figures that are too high or too low, or this account does not make sense. It mustn't be there. or even worse, this is not an income account. This is actually an asset account, or this is actually a liability account. We need to get those things sorted because we need to get the data sorted perfectly. Okay, so once I've chosen my tables that I want to use or my views, I can just click transform data. What Power BI does now, it takes you into query editor mode, or Power Query as it's usually called. This is where you can apply another layer of transformation. So keep in mind that you can do a lot of data changes in SQL Server itself, create a view, or as I mentioned in part 1, you can do a direct query by copying and pasting the query you created in SQL into Power BI and it will run it. Then you can apply another layer of changes in the Power Query Editor mode. This is where a lot of time is being spent or needs to be spent, especially in the analysis mode of data. I would say in the transforming of data, up to about minimum of 40% needs to be done. And then visualization can be, it's up to everyone's preference. I tend to spend a minimum of 40% in order, well, it depends on the complexity of the data, just to make sure it's always perfect. Because if it's great, you can just maybe use it for later, for other purposes as well. So when you get into the query editor mode, you will see a lot of buttons as well. And you'll see on the header, you've got the file, you've got the home tab, transform, add column, view, and help tab. I'm not going to use all these tabs today as it's going to take a lot of time to explain them and work through them. Maybe in later videos, I can do some deep transformation, maybe difficult transformations, working with pivots, changes, split columns, and so on. But for today, I'm going to go very basic and just work on the home tab. Now, what do I want to achieve? In the left-hand side, or what I want to achieve is to transform the data, obvious, but I want to make it simpler. I want to make it small. I want to make the data set understandable. If you look on the left-hand side, you'll see there's two queries already there. It's an account and the GL transactions. I'm going to work with the account table first. Now, it's going to display to me all the tables, or all the headers, sorry, all the columns and headers that are within that table itself. The first thing that is very important is to filter out the list. What do I need and what do I do not, or what don't I need? This will just make the data set faster and a bit smaller. First thing that I need to do is to check the companies. Is it one company, two companies, three companies? How many are there? Luckily for us, there's only 2 companies. Then I need to go and see what type of accounts it is. If I click on this drop down, I see that it's showing me assets, expenses, income, and liabilities. Today, I'm not concerned with assets nor liabilities. I just want to see all the expenses and all the income. I want to do profit and loss. I'm going to say, okay. If I go down the line of all these columns, I can maybe just see what else I want to change. Let me see what is there. It's just a bunch of system reference codes. It's very cool. It picks up as binary. Let's just see, it's more reference codes. No, it doesn't look like there's anything more. I think that's the only transformation I need to do in the account table. But yet again, it's just for demonstration purposes. Then if I move your attention to the right-hand side, you'll see query settings. So it's very cool. This side is all the queries, then it's your data, and then the query settings. I like the layout. It's really, really cool. I don't like the name of this query. I don't want to call it accounts. I maybe want to call it GL accounts. Simple as that. You can change it. And you can just click away. And if I click on the queries there, it will say GL accounts now. Very important is this next part, is the applied steps. These applied steps are all the changes that you've done on the headers that will be applied here. Let me show you an example. If I remove filtered rows, I'm going to see assets and liabilities again. But I don't want to see assets and liabilities. I want to see expenses and income. So I choose it. It will show filtered rows. As another example, maybe I do not want this to be seen as numbers, but maybe as in a text. So if I change it to text, it's showing a change type over there. So this means it's going to be, it's seeing it as a different data type. But I don't want it to be as text. I want it to go back as a number. So it will automatically always detect it for you. You can say replace current and it will take it back to the way it was. So Power BI is very cool in this space or this part as well, because it will automatically detect most of it. Because SQL Server's already got data type definitions that you've made it. You've maybe made it a small int, big int, an integer. You've changed it to varchar, maybe an nvarchar. You've changed it all to those types of data types. And Power BI will automatically pick that up for you. Okay, so I'm happy with this. I just want to remove that change type because I don't want part of my steps. And I'm going to explain to you the purpose of those steps. It's very, very important. I'm going to do the same thing with the GLtron. I want to see if my companies are correct. Yes, because we don't want any mixed duplicate values. Then I'm going to scroll through a bit. And I'm just going to see, here's my facts. You know, that's all my data. This is my figures. And is it been posted? Yes, it's very true. We only want to look at that. Transaction types, transaction description, Tron date. I don't like this Tron date. The reason why I don't like it, it's got these numbers here, or these numbers are actually the time. It's a date timestamp, is what we refer to. I just want to see the date. I'm not concerned with the time. There are two ways of changing this. You can either click on this little date time icon here, and you can just change it to a date, and then Power BI will change it. Or we can go here to the transform, and we can just say date, and it will change it for you. And if you divert your intention into the applied steps, it's going to say change type. So I didn't filter anything as I did with the GL accounts. All I did was I said change the type. Now, I don't want to call it GLtron. I want to call it GL transactions. And I'm happy with that. I can take it back. You'll also see in the change type, it's showing a little language here of function. And it's showing Tron date must be a date, type is a date. This is what we refer to as an inquiry language. It's going to show a quick little bit of it. If you click on Advanced Editor, it's showing me all the steps that Power BI needs to follow before populating it, if I can refer to that. So first it needs to get the latest information, then it transforms it with these steps. So there it is. Where's the source? I'm getting the source from this database, from that server. The database name is Acumatica Database. It must get the GLtron, and that's what it's going to be called. I changed the name. That's the table's name in the Acumatica Database. And then I changed the type for the Tron date to be only a date and not a date time. So here, if you know mQuery very well, you can just, instead of doing all the clicks and everything, you can just start coding and developing in here. And this is where Power BI reads the information. Okay, it's just a cool fun fact. And once you're done with it, you can decide, I'm happy with my data, I'm done with it, I want to load it now. So now I've extracted, we've transformed it very minimal, and now I'm going to load it to my model. And now I'm going to click on the close and apply. Now this is where Power BI applies these steps. It's loading, it's getting the data, it's loading the rows, and it's going to populate it for you. As you can see, it's not as many rows, it's about 80,000 transactions. And now comes the question, where's my data? Okay. Now that it's loaded, why can't I work with it now? So if you look on the left-hand side, you've got three tabs here. You've got your report tab, you've got your data tab, and your model tab. If you click on the data tab, there's your data, it's loaded. There's my GL accounts, and there's my GL transactions. Now, another question would arise is, why is it being displayed here if it's already being displayed in the query editor? So I don't really have a direct answer for that, but I know the simplest way of me explaining it is the query editor is where you do all the technical stuff. It's where you can do big transformations. As you saw, you can also do run R scripts. It's a statistical programming language. You can run Python scripts. You can do very technical stuff in the query editor. And that is where you can get your data perfect. In this part, you can see there's only very minimal things you can do here. You can only click on the modeling tab. You can add a measure, which is a formula. I'm going to show that to you now. Add a new column and add a new table. That's it. It's very minimal. The most used function within the data tab will be to add a new column. That is literally what we're also going to do just now as well. Now, another way of viewing it is you can go back to home on the report tab and on fields. There's all your fields. So you use your fields to build your visualizations and you filter the field data with the filters. That's what the model tab is there for, or the data tab. Let's maybe jump right into it and do a quick change. So one thing I noticed is the type. I know that I and E is E and I is expenses and income, but no, it's telling me the nice wording of it. It's not telling me, listen, it's an expense or an income. It's just showing I and E, and you don't want to group your data showing I and E. You want it to look nice. So maybe let's add a column to just change that a bit. How we can do this is with a simple if statement by just showing if it equals I, then income, else expense. That's a very basic one. There is another very cool formula called switch. The switch formula says if the value is true, then do this. And if the value equals this, then that, then that. You can put as many as you want in there. So let's say we worked with income, expenses, liabilities, and assets. I would have used the switch function to group everything together. So let's create this one. I'm going to call this one expenses slash or expense slash income. And I'm going to say equals if the logical test is if type equals I, then income, else expense. And then sorry, there we go. I missed it over there. There we go. Then expense. Let's make a nice space there. And I'm going to say, okay, let's see if it worked. Now this looks very nice. I like this more. This looks much better than just using the I and the E. So that's another way of just making additional changes or transforming the data a little bit there. That's just a nice figure or feature that you can do by adding new columns, and you can apply different changes. Now, these formulas that I used here are called DAX formulas. It stands for Data Analytical Expressions. It's a language that was designed in order to do some of these formulas. You'll notice it's referencing a lot to Excel. It is a lot referencing to Excel. I would just say it's a very, very high advanced Excel. Okay, I am happy with that column. So another column can be used in filtering or grouping. Now comes the other tab, which is the model tab. Now these two tables look very lonely, but I know that they can talk to one another. We want to cause a relationship to happen. We want this relationship to happen between them. Now the question comes, why do we want it to happen? Let me explain this to you. If I were to create a quick table by just saying, I want to see all the debits and credits of all the accounts, okay? Now I'm going to click on the account table and I'm going to choose description. Boom, there's all my income and expense accounts. And now, this is going to be simple. That's what we're thinking. I just want to see all the debits and credits. So I'm going to choose credit and I'm going to choose debit. Whoa, these figures don't look right. The reason why these figures aren't right is because Power BI doesn't know that advertising expense, what its true credit amount or debit amount is, because they're not lying in the same table. If it was on row level like this, so if I go to accounts, so just scroll this side. If it was on row level, sales and returns, and it showed there, total credits, total debits, or total debits and total credits, then it would have shown here. But they're lying in different tables. But not to worry, we can join them together. In SQL, this is what we refer to as the joining function or the joining clauses. We need to join the two tables so that they can talk to one another, so that they have the binding relationship. What I filter in the one, it will show in the other what the results are. Now, Power BI does have the capabilities of automatically detecting relationships, but if it doesn't, this is where you have to have some knowledge of the tables and database as well. But I know that account ID talks with account ID because I want to know what expense and income accounts, the transactions. I want to know the credits and the debits. So I can just simply click on it, drag it, and it will connect. What Power BI does now, it sees that it's a single unique value that is connected to multiple unique values. So I can have account ID 101, but there can be 1,000 row items of account 101. But that's perfect. So if I filter for account 101, it's going to show me all the results for 101. That is how the basic filtering works. Now, if I wanted to bring in more tables, I can bring as many as I want. The complexity does get a bit tricky if you start bringing in a lot of tables and they don't talk too well to one another. And we can maybe do that in a later video explaining how to work with some problems or some errors in Power BI and how to work with them around them. For now, I'm happy with this. I know that any account that I choose will show me all the transactions. Now comes in the thing, and if I go back, boom, now it's making sense. Now I can actually see all the credits and debits that are referenced to the correct accounts. But we're not done now. We can't go just to part 3 now. I'm not happy with this result. The reason why I'm not happy with this result is this gap here. There's no account linked to this billions of credits and billions of debits. Because these figures are so high, one thing hits my mind, and it's telling me that, oh, remember, Francois, when you did this, you went to Query Editor, and you remember you already filtered that GL accounts. And I was like, oh yes, I did filter that. I only filtered for expenses and income. So that means there are GL transactions for assets and liabilities. Those are those figures, and it's making sense because assets are usually very high figures. That means that there are figures that are not linked to anyone. Shame, it's a lonely heart. The others are all linked, they're all in a relationship. They are talking to one another, but not too well. There's a missing link between them. What can I do in that case? In SQL, it would be simple. We would write an inner join query and the result set would already have filtered it out for us. What I usually do is I filter the visual. So there are 3 levels of filtering in Power BI in terms of when you go into the visuals. I'm just touching a little bit on part 3 now, but not too much. Is you can filter on a visual, you can filter on the page itself. So everything on the page will be filtered based on what you said, or filter on all pages. I just want to filter the visual. So I'm going to go to GL accounts and I'm going to choose account ID. And I'm going to say there are also another level of filtering. I'm just going to say basic filtering. I'm going to choose everything except the blanks because I don't care about the blanks. I don't want to see the blanks. We know that there are assets and liabilities, but we only want to focus on income and expenses. And what you can do is you can also hide this filter. And once you're done, I can see now it's looking nice. It's actually making sense. There's a big difference between the credits and the debits, but let's have a look if they are actually making a profit. What I'm going to do now is I want to see the true credits and debits, because remember the difference between expenses and income, not all the credits are the same with both of them, and not all the debits are the same with both of them. What we have to do in a case like this is we're going to build something called a measure. A measure is just a formula. Think of an Excel formula, and we're just building it into the data set so that Power BI understands, okay, so you want to do this with that, and I want this result. Perfect. Now that's where we're going to write a little bit of DAX. Now the internet is full of DAX recommendations or DAX courses that you can take. It is a language that you need to understand, because if you don't understand the DAX too well, you can't usually use Power BI in that case, because that's where most of the changes or manipulation occurs, is within the DAX itself. The transformation happens within the query editor, but the manipulation happens in the DAX. And there are a lot of DAX formulas, and some of them are extremely powerful. So I know that expenses work differently in credits and debits, and income also works different in credits and debits. So I can't just subtract the debits from the credits. I can't do that. I need to make it unique so that I know what each one means. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the credit and the debit amount, and I'm going to create my first measure, and I'm going to throw it in the accounts. I'm going to click on new measure on the right-hand top sign under calculations, and a little formula bar will pop up. First, you have to give your formula a name and then write the formula. I have already pre-populated some of these formulas from a previous report that I use or built. I'm just going to change some of it, and I'm going to explain it to you nicely. Okay, what this does, it's telling me the proper amount of the expense. The formula that we use is called the calculate formula. The calculate formula is just telling Power BI, listen, I want you to do the calculation based on these variables or based on these parameters. So I'm telling it, calculate the sum of the debit amount, whereby income and expenses, that's that cool table we created, or that column we created now, equals expenses minus the credit amount where it equals expenses, because that's how you calculate the expenses, the debit amount minus the credit amount. So let's change this. But now it's reading from query 1, but we changed this. We called this GL transactions, and there it reads it. So I am just going to take this. I'm just going to change everything in query. Unfortunately, it's not like in SQL, you can just say find and replace. You have to write it out. GL transactions. But the IntelliSense is very, very nice. So I'm just going to say GL transactions, and then the same there. Okay, GL transactions. Okay, so this one is not GL transactions. This one is GL accounts, because we want to filter the table of account. This is why the relationship is important, because then you can work with this. Different types of formulas talking to different types of tables. So now I'm just going to say there accounts, and there it picks up expense and income. And then the same will apply with GL transactions. And then the same will apply there with GL accounts and GL accounts equals expense minus 1, because we want to subtract it, because an expense is a negative value. Once I'm happy with it, I simply say commit. And it's working on it. And if it picks up an error, it will always tell you the error result here at the bottom, like a big yellow bar. It will tell you what's wrong. Just like Excel also sometimes says it's a value error or an NA error or this error. I can simply close it and I can go back. I'm not going to place it yet, because remember, we only did the amount for all the expenses. We're missing something. We have to do for the income as well. So I'm just going to take exactly the same formula, but I'm not going to make it a negative. I'm going to make it a positive, because it's good. It's fun having income. It's great. And I am going to go to new measure. And I'm just going to do the same, exactly the same thing I did with the amount of expenses. So I'm just going to say GL transactions, and I'm going to go there, and I'm going to say GL accounts. So just hold on. There we go. I'm going to do the same there. It's not query 1, it's GL transactions. And then I'm going to say GL accounts, and then GL accounts. All right. And then I missed something there. Thank you. The little squiggly underline. I always call it the squiggly underlining. And I'm going to say GL accounts, and voila. And I'm going to say commit. Before I commit, just bear in mind that I didn't do that column. I added the expense and incomes for this purpose. I only did that extra column to make the report nice, as I'm going to show in part 3, how you can group it and filter with it as well. And it just looks nicer than saying I and E. I could have also said here, there's no difference where the type equals I and where the type equals I. can do the same thing there. And I'm going to say commit. And now it's done. What's going to happen now is I'm going to say, show me the expense amounts and show me the income amounts. So let's maybe switch them around. Just hold on. And there we go. So I can see that I made an income of 205 and I had an expense of 193. Boom. I can already see we made a profit. This is excellent. This is great news. But now I can also group it and see which accounts it was. But now the accounts are all scattered. I'm just going to quickly place that nice column we created by saying income and expenses, and I'm going to place it right there. And now, ooh, what's it doing now? Now it's just showing what's an expense and what's an income. That's where you're going to have to use the different visualizations. I'm just going to continue to that one, and I'm going to say the rows must be the description, and now it's grouped by my expenses and income. If I click on that, it's showing everything. And if I click on the income, it's showing it. Now it's also showing it distorted. It's showing it on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. I don't like that. I want it in one. I only want to see a total. Can we do that? Certainly we can. What I can do now is I'm going to create a measure based on other measures. I'm going to create a total column. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to call it, let's just say amount. And I'm going to say, let me just see, I also did it. Yeah, there we go. And I'm going to say equals actual income. Let me just quickly see what we call it. We call it amount. Amount income minus amount expense. Now you can see that it's changing to purple. Purple means that it's referencing to another measure. This is very cool. This is nested functions that you can do within Power BI DAX. I can use this amount income could be referenced to another DAX formula. And that DAX formula could be referenced to another one and another one. The levels just keep going. Just bear in mind that if the DAX formulas do reference a lot, it can get very slow, depending on your hardware that you do have. But in this case, this is a singular reference or a one level reference. It's not a multiple reference level. It will work nicely. And I can click OK. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the amount income and amount expense. Let's see if this works. And there's my amount. Now it looks nice. Now I can have a look and I can see my total expenses was 193, income was 205, and I made a profit of 11,559,000. That is how Power BI gave me the capabilities of gathering my data, extracting it, changing a little bit and making sense to me. And this is just part of the little testing phase to see if my data is making sense. The first thing what I would do now is I would take this figure to the main accountant or the chief accountant and make sure it's balancing back. If it balances back, that's yippee-ki-yay, I'm super happy. Now I can go into the fun part, which is part 3, visualizing in Power BI. And I just want to say also thank you for joining, and please go follow us on all the social medias. You know, there's so many out there these days, but I know the most popular ones are obviously Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, especially YouTube, because we are releasing epic content. And please don't forget to join part 3. Thank you.